There we go. Hello, everybody. I'm IW Gregorio, and I wanted to thank you guys all for coming to this amazing. Did I say amazing? I really did. This amazing Asian Author Alliance panel. I'm so happy to be here to moderate these incredible women whose books are going to blow your mind and really, I think, redefine the genre of romance for you guys. So from the top of the screen going down, Farah Heron.
Hello.
And then there's Tif Marcelo and SK Ali. And I wanted to start off just by having you guys just say hi, introduce yourself, and give a quick elevator pitch of your book. Do you want to start, Farah?
Sure, I probably should have had one. If I tilt, you can kind of see it on
Yes,
the wall there. So my debut came out last year. It's called The Trifactor. It's a rom-com set in Toronto with a Muslim South Asian engineer heroine, and the hero is a white Canadian musician with a really big long red beard. And the book came out last year, and then I have another one coming out next year, and then one the year after.
Great. Tiff, you have a bunch of books. So which ones do you want to highlight today?
Yeah, so I am a romance and contemporary women's fiction author. My romance series is The Journey to the Heart, and it's a food romance set in San Francisco. And my last two books are the contemporary women's fiction, and my most recent is Once Upon a Sunset, and it's a mother-daughter story about these women that figure out that they have more family than they had anticipated, and then traveled to the Philippines to discover family and love at the same time.
And then Khadijah?
Hi. Yeah. Hi, I'm S. Kelly, and I'm the author of YA novels, Saints and Misfits, and my latest that came out last year, which is Love from A to Z, which is about two teens who meet at the worst times in their lives when they're not their best selves to be, entering a new relationship or romance, and how they figure it out. And so that's Love from A to Z. I also have a sequel to Saints and Misfits coming out next year, and just other books that I've written for children as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I love the diversity of this group, and I love the diversity of the types of books that we each write, yet how they're all kind of intertwined by the complexity, I think. This Is My Brain in Love is also considered a foodie rom-com, Tiff, so I didn't realize it was a genre, but apparently it is. And it's a mostly happy book about mental illness that I like to say is strongly based on my own history growing up in an immigrant community in where my anxiety and depression were just undiagnosed because I didn't have the language to talk about it. And it's about two teens trying to navigate that, both in the context of being teenagers, but also in the context of both being kids of color. And so I think that one of the things that really draws all of our books together is that I think that hopefully we are trying to create the romances that we wish we had when we were younger. And I sort of wanted to start off by asking you guys, can you guys remember growing up when you saw yourself in a romance novel?
When I wrote one?
Yeah, exactly.
I still haven't seen something that I really felt that identified with my own cultural and belief system.
Yeah.
Until I wrote my own.
I apologize, but that is a question that just came up because I did come up with pre-cleared questions. So I will start with that. But I will have us think about the fact that I think that we all kind of wrote books that we wish we had had when we were younger. And one of the things I admire so much about your books is the importance of setting and ethnicity, and we can talk about that because I feel like so much about writing romance is really challenging because the field is so crowded and like there's such a history and it's really hard to keep things fresh. However, I feel that you all have made your own takes in the genre, and so can you just talk a little bit about how you've tried to make this genre your own? And I'll go backwards in the opposite direction. So SK, if you want to go first.
Yeah, so like Farah said, like I didn't really get to see, my identity and my experience as a Muslim reflected in any stories really. But especially with the romance genre, or like anything with Muslims in relationships, a lot of these stories were about forced marriage, or even arranged marriage, which again is a very cultural, um, you know, way of entering relationships. And I never saw the kind of stories that like, the way I entered into relationships and the way my friends and family did, which was through meeting people. And, the serendipity factor was there. And that I didn't see reflected. So, again, like, even though the romance genre is crowded, each of us have like a way to, to, to explore romance and relationships that's a little bit distinct. And for In Love from A to Z, the distinctiveness came from a different setting, because I chose to set this in Doha, which is in Qatar in the Middle East, because a lot of like other locations like Paris and Rome, and these were all like seen as like romantic locations for a romance to be set. But I lived in Doha for almost a year, and I just remember like the places that were there that like had this sparkly element to it that's so vital for like to be a backdrop for a romance. I remembered that like we don't get to see places in the Middle East or in Asia or in other places where it's seen in that light and the lens of like, oh, this is so beautiful and magical. And so that's why I chose to deliberately, set this story of love there. Also, the other part that was really like kind of, I hope gives it a distinct flavor is that both Adam and Zainab, both Adam and Zainab, they both have similar journals, and their journals are based on an ancient manuscript that's like part of the Muslim world. And so that was something like that was like bringing a little bit of, heritage and culture that you don't always see, and bringing it into the canon. Because like growing up, so many things are part of our canon that's not really reflective of our diverse heritages. Like it's a lot of Eurocentric, backgrounds, and just a lot of developments that like about love and about just thinking about relationships that come from a different culture, and then the ones that a lot of my friends and I were part of. So this was my attempt to kind of redress some of that.
And I love that. I love seeing the Doha setting. And Tif, a lot of your stories are set in the Philippines, and are also informed by your military background. Did you want to talk about those things?
Yeah, and it's actually on my last book that's in the Philippines, but all of my books have Filipino-American characters in it, and as well as military folks, because I am a veteran. I really wanted to write these aspects in because it's just such an important part of my life. But I do want to say that I don't, maybe it's from where I'm standing, but I feel like there's room in romance for it to grow. I'm banking on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm banking on it, and I am banking on it for all of my Filipino American authors who are out there who are trying to come in, who are trying to stay in, because it's not just about coming in, but it's staying in publishing, right? So I sure hope that it's not crowded, because there's so many stories to write, especially from our Filipino American counterparts. And to the point of like finding myself and connecting, it's interesting because I actually, I came to romance late in terms of reading romance, only in the last 10 years. So it's been an evolving thing for me to find myself within the writing journey and writing romance and romantic women's fiction. But I did really look up to Melissa de la Cruz. When her book came out fresh off the boat, I think that was 2005. And in the past, I've read Filipino literature, but I felt like at the time was really not accessible for me, and to see commercial fiction, the commercial fiction that she writes, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is it. So it was such hope when I found that book. and then finding a community, romance community with authors of color, I felt like I fit right in. Until kind of I found my way through and I found romance class, you know, the romance authors that are there in the Philippines, and then finding like Mia Hopkins, like just looking for these people. It's been a journey. So I'm just glad to be here as part of that.
All right.
Yeah, I agree with Tiff in saying that I think there is room for us. It's funny, when I started writing, when I started getting involved in the romance community, I didn't see myself there. I didn't see that I would be welcomed with open arms, writing stories of my own heritage and my own background. So I know I'm not the only one, but a lot of authors of color, when they start, they write mainstream because they think that's what the market has for them. And I remember very vividly another author I met really early in my journey, who said to me that she's South Asian, and that she was the one that encouraged me to. She's like, just think about writing South Asian stories. I'm like, well, nobody's gonna be able to relate. And then she's like, you don't need to relate. You just need to empathize. You need to see other perspectives. So that's when I kind of started, and I still didn't really see that much of a place for me there until I started looking at meeting other women of color who are writing romance. There's not a lot of there wasn't a lot of South Asian romance back when I started. Since then, it's exploded and it's fabulous, and I love it. And we have a huge community. But it was kind of a little bit early. It was before Sonali Dev's book, I think, which was like the first like romance genre South Asian that I can think of that really hit it big. So once I kind of found my footing, then I was like, I'm only ever going to write this now. There's going to be a place for me. If they want me, great. If not, then that's it. That's what I'm going to do. Because now I see the importance of having other perspectives and different stories to tell, so that we're not just getting one idea of what romance looks like.
So my next question is a little bit about how, I know personally, growing up in an immigrant family, I barely got the birds and the bees talk. So I'm wondering if you think it's a special challenge writing Asian American love stories because of the cultural barriers to talking about intimacy. And I guess, Sadija, especially for the YA community.
So personally, myself, I didn't grow up with seeing like some topics as taboo, and that was due to like, I think I came from a home where my father really encouraged the exploring whatever you wanted to talk about, and though it was more like an intellectual capacity, but in the Muslim community that I grew up in, sex was talked about. It was candid, like things that you were feeling as growing up, that was discussed. It was part of like recognized to be part of being a human. It's people might not know, but the Quran talks about those topics, like of being with somebody and like falling for somebody and stuff. So it wasn't something. I didn't feel like it was taboo. Like I actually would be like, oh, please don't talk to me about it. Like, because my dad would be like, when I come back from a summer camp, he'd be like, oh, so who do you have a crush on now? And I'd be like, I don't want to talk to you about this. But like, so like that aspect of like what it feels like to come from a family that's free in talking about these topics, I really put that into Zainab's, viewpoint in the story. Because she talks about that, like where she's not, she was never told to keep away from the boys and all those kind of stuff. And that's how I kind of grew up myself as well. So that's that, I felt kind of free about exploring that. And, at the same time, there's an exploration of what it looks like when you're grappling with these feelings of like, lust and all these things, but you're still told, to contain it till a time when you can be with the right person. So there is a candid exploration of what that feels like as well in the story. So, I didn't shy away from exploring it because I think people want to, um, you know, like come to like an understanding of how different people deal with these topics. And so I always like feel very free in my writing. And I think just an aspect of being, I feel like a being like an authentic writer or artist is to not shy away from like the hard stuff or the truths and stuff. So that's something I just exercised writing this book. Yeah, so
Either of you guys have any insight into that question?
Yeah, it's kind of a tough one writing. Obviously, Sajida has the same perspective, writing from a Muslim perspective. I'm writing adult romance, and in adult romance, there's an expectation of, I wouldn't say expectation, but I would say that there is a lot of people want the sexual content in the book. I myself am not extremely religious, and I was okay with putting premarital sex in my books. I knew that from the beginning that I would be okay with it. But it's another thing to actually have it graphically portrayed as opposed to just talked about. So the Trifactor does not have very graphic. It's kind of a fade to black kind of thing. But each of my books that I've written since then has been, well, the doors open a little bit more this time. Oh, maybe you can look through the window. So it's just a little bit more. And that's something that I kind of had to really think about because of my community's expectations of what I'm going to be writing about, as well as what I want people to be open about their sexuality. I want women in our own culture to understand sex positivity and not have shame about their bodies or about what they like and what they don't like. So to find that balance where I feel like I'm still being honest with myself and what I think should be on the page, but at the same time not to disrespect my culture and the beliefs of people within my community. So it's kind of a tricky one. It's like you have to walk a fine line, and it's also really weird that my aunties and uncles are going to read it. That's probably
Exactly.
something that we all think about.
Exactly. Although it's interesting, my first novel, None of the Above, there was a sex scene within the first couple chapters, and ironically, it wasn't my Asian family that I was most concerned about. My husband is Italian, and he has a priest in his family, who actually ended up loving the book and like recommended to all his people. So I was like, I feel like these cultural barriers exist in every culture, but like particularly from my own experience, I know that I grew up with my grandparents and they passed away or have been incapacitated before reading my books, and I'm kind of glad about that because I don't think that I ever would have felt comfortable talking about things with them.
So my parents are very like proper. So I grew up in such a proper family, and then I'm the eldest girl. So that carries a lot of, that carries a lot of pressure to act right, to be right. We weren't allowed to cuss, and I wasn't allowed to call my brothers stupid or dumb, so even like English words that might be somewhat insulting were taken out of our vocabulary at home. So, so when I told my parents I was writing romance, it was sort of like asking for their blessing, even though I was like 38 years old. And I had to pretty much tell them like, this is what's going to happen in the book, and it's up to you whether or not you want to read it. My brother, it's funny because also as the first child, like I totally am the one that's breaking my parents in, right? Because, and my brothers have never, even though they were way more wild than me, like my parents, I guess that's okay for them, but I wasn't allowed to do any of that stuff. There's so many like these hidden things. And I was really nervous when I published my book, because I would say if it was like a 0 to 10 heat rating, it was probably like 2 or 3. So it's not even like mega hot, but I knew that it was enough that my mom was going to freak out. And it's funny because I ended up being a registered nurse, working in labor and delivery, which is like the result of intercourse, right? So,
Exactly.
so I'm like, all these things they were trying to
Something we talk
we're not
about
allowed to,
all-
we
yeah,
didn't
every
talk
day.
about sex at all, like not at all. And like our body parts had like beautiful sounding names. You know what I mean? Like this is a flower, so it was something for me to overcome. But I think that after that first book, I was like, all right, I'm done. Like I can write whatever I want now. But yeah,
I'm going to give my dad a list of pages to skip with my next one.
that's good.
Exactly.
That's a good
Or like
idea.
give them a copy where the parts of the pages are conveniently glued
Blacked
together
out.
with
Blacked out.
rice or something like that. Like, oh,
It's
okay.
like deep into the pages, like all the.
Exactly.
So funny.
Like a CIA doc.
Yeah, exactly. CIA deck. This page has
Redacted,
been
redacted.
retracted.
Yeah, exactly. Redacted. Go through with the exact name. So one of the things I love so much about all of your books is that all of your stories are really layered. They're not only about, love and romance. They're about financial stress and family and Islamophobia and homophobia. And I sort of like to describe my books as blueberries. Like, yeah, they taste good, but they're also good for you. Like, they're antioxidants. They're good for you because they address tough topics. They start conversations. And can you guys talk about how whether, I'm assuming you did it deliberately, like the tough topics that you tried to weave into your books to make them more complex?
So I guess I'll start. Actually, when I set out to write Love from A to Z, I set out deliberately to write something light, fluffy, no hard topics, because I was like, it's time for that. But then all these topics kept coming in, and it was like, I was like, no, and I didn't want to give in to it. But then there was a moment that I had to be like, well, because one of the reasons I wanted to write like a light, fluffy book was as I was seeing all these stories of pain, POC pain coming out, especially when I debuted with a painful story, Saints and Misfits, about a girl, grappling with sexual assault and, finding her voice about it. That year, there was a lot of books with painful topics and trauma. And I was like, no, I'm going to do a light, fluffy one. But then I had to come to this realization that, a lot of our stories haven't been explored of as marginalized people. Like we haven't had the chance to tell our stories. And so now that, things have opened up, it's okay. Just let in whatever needs to be expressed. And so I decided to explore the Islamophobia that I'd personally faced growing up in safe spaces, because a lot of Islamophobia is like, sometimes it's like it happens like by the bad people, or like the people who are expected to show that kind of hate. But then what about the Islamophobia that happens in classrooms, and that happens where you're sitting there and you don't have the power to really take it on? So I just let that in, because that was something I felt on and off, like as a student. And a lot of young Muslims feel that. So then I was like, I'm going to let that in. And the other part, that with Adam's point of view in the story, he's got, he's been diagnosed with an illness that's, really hard. It's life altering. And I didn't want to shy away from writing about that, because it was something that my sister had brought up with me, saying that a lot of, sometimes books with people with illness, she didn't see the hope in them as much as she wanted. And there was a personal experience in our family with multiple sclerosis, and how you can there's hope even after being diagnosed. And so then I didn't, I was like, okay, I'm gonna write about this hard topic, but it's gonna be with a sense of hope and resilience, and what that looks like, even as young people going through it. So that's where I just went like all in, and didn't resist, and didn't say, oh no, I'm just gonna stay to like a light and fluffy, but I'm still gonna write that light and fluffy one day.
No, I love that, because you were very clear that angry people can still fall in love, you know, and I
Yes.
love it. I really enjoyed Fluffy.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think my answer would be almost exactly such it is. I also set out to write something fluffy, and then when I started writing it, more than anything else I'd ever written, and actually ever written since Chi Factor, I had no inhibitions when I wrote it. I wrote it and I just let anything happen. I didn't think it through, which I find great that ended up being my debut. It's just literally just throw it on the page. So when these themes of homophobia and Islamophobia started coming out, I didn't hold back, even though I had intended to write. I mean, it's a ridiculous premise of a woman finding a barbershop quartet living in her basement when she comes home to do her project. So I knew that the humor was going to be there. It's a rom-com, but to let those serious topics weave in, I just kind of let it happen. And I tried to do exactly what Sajida was saying about showing how in our everyday lives, we cannot escape the skin we're in. We can't escape when people find out I'm a Muslim, the comments will come out. That's not something that I can just kind of turn off for the day and just not have to deal with it. And I didn't want it to be something that my characters could just turn off and not have to deal with it because they're living in a rom-com. So that was kind of my thoughts on that as well. Also, what you said, Eileen, is I also wanted to show a difficult, prickly heroine and show that she has a reason for being angry, number one. And number two is she's just as entitled to a happily ever after. Because a lot of times when we're dealing with the crazy, maybe not crazy, the world that we're dealing with right now is so difficult. And a lot of people are internalizing it. And yeah, they might be bitter about it. They might be angry. But that doesn't mean they're not entitled to have their happy ending at the end.
So when I wrote my my romance series, like I threw everything 100, everything I loved into the North to you. It was, you get to a point like in your, when you're querying, right? I'm sure we remember those trenches very well. And I had written so many manuscripts like before getting my agent. And when it came time to write this book, my first one, I literally told myself, you're going to put everything in this book. And that meant everybody that I loved into this book. And when I say everybody that I love, it's sort of like I imagine like my brother getting this book, my brother falling in love in his story. And just as a side note, like he's an Alaskan mountain man, and he's always telling me that I need to follow up with like an Alaskan family like that lives up there, because he's up there looking for love. Right. So, but I just put everything into this book, and writing my series, those first 3 books like gave me so much joy. Because I put everything in there to include all of these, what I felt that were nuances in my family. And that was something that I was looking for. So it's interesting because, for me, it wasn't like seeing a Filipino on the page, because I was able to see all these other books with people of color and have empathy and really, subscribe to that book and love that book. But it was the nuances of what made our family Filipino American, which is so hard to even like describe. And I can't even describe it even now, right?
There's no single answer. And
there's no single answer. It's my family of an immigrant, and a family that's been in America for like 30 plus years that have, it's so to be able to like throw everything in there, gave me so much joy. And I think that for me, like being able to put my family in my books was like the greatest thing ever. So, yeah.
I'm going to ask a question that I didn't include in the initial. Can you guys talk a little bit about your acquisition process and the editorial process, and how much leeway you had to write these own voices stories in the way that you wanted to write them? Positive and negative experiences allowed.
I have had only positive experiences with my editor. My editor's fantastic. My agent's fantastic. Dina, I think that the match was just right.
Yeah.
And there is a trust there. And at the same time, I trust right back, so there's been a lot of, as you all have experienced, like with the Key to Happily Ever After, we started with 4 sisters and we ended up with 3 by the end of the book. But it was one of those things where she trusted me with so many of these little things that belong to the culture that I belong to. And I trusted her with, okay, Tiff, there's too many sisters on this page. I think we need to cut out one. So it's a very much an equal footing, in my opinion, as well as with my agent. So,
do you care to give a shout out to your agents and your editors?
Yeah. So I've got Kate Dresser, who is Gallery Books, and Rachel Brooks with Bookends Lit as my agent.
Farah, you also have Rachel?
Yeah,
Rachel,
Rachel, yes. Tiff and I actually met through, how long ago was that? A while ago, through having the same agent. So I'm on my second editor because the book that is releasing next year is with Forever Grand Central, and my first one was with HarperCollins Canada. Both times I've had no issues with my editors and getting the cultural parts of my book. Nobody's ever asked me to tone down, especially some of the really out there. Like I was able to call out white supremacy and nobody said, oh, that's a little rough. So I've been very lucky. I haven't had anybody say that she's a little bit too, well, I've had readers say she's a little bit of a too much of an angry Muslim, but I've never had anyone in the industry say that. My agent is fabulous, and she really, really gets what I'm trying to do with these stories. And one of the things that I think, Tiff has the same agent, so she'll agree with me that one of the great things about Rachel is that she has clients from so many different backgrounds. That she is respectful of us telling our own stories the way we want, and she finds the thing, for her it's often food, but she finds the thing that's the common bond that we all have, and she's like, this is something that she can identify with. I've had great experiences, and I know that there are people that have not had as good experiences, but I've been quite lucky.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I feel like the luckiest writer sometimes in the industry, because I got to work with the only like Muslim editor, I think, in publishing for a long time. She, Zareen Jaffrey, who was at Simon and Schuster when Love from A to Z was acquired. So I actually, like Tiff, I like how you said it, that like you trusted, and she trusted you. So that was exactly my relationship, because I love just the experience of every part of the experience of working with Zareen. She gets my stories on this really like insider level that allows me to feel like, I don't know how to describe it, but it allows me to like be more creative too, because I'm like, I feel free writing something that I know the person receiving it gets and understands. And it's just, I don't think my books like would be anywhere as like publishable or successful without having worked with Zareen, because it's just a sense of confidence too that you get when you're in a good working relationship with your publisher and your editor. So I'm very, very happy and fortunate to have had that experience. I sometimes when I first started wanting to be actually published, like when I think of how long that journey took, where you're getting that like, okay, now I'm ready to query, and I'm ready to put my work out there, and I don't regret any bit of that time, because like for Salam Reads to have come out with Zareen at the helm, it had to be at that moment, like for me to step out with that confidence. Yeah. So I don't regret any of that. Yeah.
I mean, that highlights one of the reasons why We Need Diverse Books felt like we had to attack the lack of diversity in the publishing industry at every level. Like, it's not, the onus is not on the authors. I mean, they need to have editors and marketing teams and PR publicity teams that are able to to get their books and sell them in the correct way. I mean, I think I got incredibly lucky with This Is My Brain in Love, and my editor was Elvina Ling, who is also Taiwanese American, and we actually, fun fact, we actually lived in the same town in upstate New York. Like when we were both kids, we were in this chopsticks dance together, and I was the one that dropped the chopsticks. And Grace Lynn also was in the same school system. But
wow.
yeah, I know, crazy. But it's interesting that it had to be specifically someone who was Taiwanese American, because I actually had another Asian American editor read the manuscript, and there was one point when she was like talking. It was just a proposal, but at some point she like asked me, "Do you even speak Chinese?" Because I was using the Taiwanese Hokkien dialect term for grandmother, and like I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like this is another Asian American woman, and obviously, again, there's no single story. There's so much diversity within every single culture that to be matched up with an editor who gets it. I mean, that's the whole battle in some respects, and so the fact that publishing is starting to change internally is what's going to allow these books to really be seen, which I'm really excited about. It's 36 minutes, so there are a couple more questions. I just wanted to do a little round where we just talk about the joys of writing romance. So I want you guys to talk about what you love most about writing romance, and maybe even talk about some of your favorite scenes.
I'm going to go first here. My favorite thing about writing romance is that you get to give a happy ending at the end. And you can give the reader exactly what they want, is that everyone's going to be happy. And you can torture your characters along the way, and that still at the end, everybody's going to be happy. I feel that it gives you that freedom to do whatever you want with your characters, because, I mean, it's extremely challenging depending on what you put them through to get to that happy ending at the end. But I love the fact that that no matter what happens, I know how the end is going to be. That's my favorite thing about romance. And it's so uplifting, right?
Tif,
That's the same thing for me. I mean, it's I love the happily ever after so much that even in my contemporary women's fiction, like I want everybody to be okay. So I've had folks tell me when they read my women's fiction, like it wraps up so nicely, they'll say, or it's too easy. And I'm like, well, I mean, I want everybody to be all right. I mean, that is the deal. There are enough books out there for other folks to read that can end in a way that is not so satisfying. But I definitely want to be able to write satisfying books. And I also definitely want to make sure that that I show that everybody's deserving of it. So even if they did not act so well throughout the story, that there is change, that folks can change, and that they can still find love throughout those changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you both said that, because so I did. Okay, this was like my first I didn't really study what it's like to write a romance, and only later did I find out there's certain tropes that's that there's two relationships and there's two romances and these different things. I didn't actually. I went into it really blind, just really trying to capture two different people falling in love. But my favorite part, one of my favorite parts, was making Adam choose Zainab, and her, a young Muslim girl, being the it girl. And I don't want to give a spoiler, but he had to, choose her and not somebody who would be more likely to have been the romantic interest. So that was really special to me, because we always had to be the sidekick if we ever were seen as marginalized people of color, and so that was something amazing for me to give voice to that. The other parts that I really liked was the the cringy moments that happens with awkward first love, because it's a YA. And there was this whole scene and where water is used as a metaphor, and I actually was going to delete the entire thing because I was like, cringe, cringe, cringe. This whole thing is cringy. But then I didn't end up doing that. And a lot of people now say that, like, though they were cringing too and they're reading it, like it really captures the kind of like awkwardness of like first conversations and, you know, first love and stuff. So yeah, I enjoyed writing it because there was that subtle use of humor and that, you know, exploring what it feels like to like feel all these things inside, but being so vulnerable about like, I don't want to show it because then I'll look like I'm too much into you, and the other person, because it's a dual point of view narrative. So I got to explore what the other person's thinking too. And so it was just so fun to just like go to like show the vulnerability, but then you know, do it in a fun way. So yeah.
I love that, and my book is also written in dual narrative, and it was such a joy to be able to kind of take myself out of my own experiences and understand my past romances better by being forced to look at both sides of the story. And one of the reasons why I wanted to write in dual point of view is that both my characters have their own mental illness. One is prone to depression, one is prone to anxiety, and I wanted to show that the same incident viewed by two different people with two different sets of cognitive distortions, you know, can lead to hijinks, sometimes, you know, romantic hijinks, sometimes not. And the ability to do that was such a it was I mean, it was kind of therapy for me too, because being able to think through the thought processes of two different things and being able to tap into that sense of innocence and first love rush, it was a true joy. But yes, my daughter definitely cringed it. Told me that the 5 pages of kissing that I had in it were cringy. So there are downsides to everything. So, we have a bunch of questions from the audience, so I'm going to start taking them, if you guys don't mind. So is it Shalia asks, what's a romance trope that we can find in your books, and what's a romance trope that you want to write into your future stories?
So my Chai factor and pretty much everything I will ever write, because it's my absolute favorite trope, is forced confinement.
Yes.
Where the hero and heroine cannot avoid the other person because they are right there all the time. In Chai factor, the hero is living in the heroine's apartment. My next one, they are living across the hall from each other. One of the things that's super important when you start writing romance is you have to figure out how to get these two people who are not in love at the time to get them on the page at the same time, because so they can fall in love. So stick them next door. It's the easiest way.
Yeah, mine. I love forced proximity. My third book is an RV.
Perfect. Very small.
I know. I mean, and because we have an RV, so I know exactly how it feels to be in forced proximity with like 5 other members, and of course with your loved one. But I would have to say forced proximity is definitely something I love. In fact, I'm drafting something now with forced proximity. I would really love to do a good enemies to lovers or competition. Like, I feel like that's very hard to write because you want them to be in competition, but not be like jerks to one another. I mean, there can be jerks too, but you know, there's that line that I believe folks really have the talent to be able to traverse that line really well, where we're rooting for both of them so that they can get together.
That's great.
Yeah, so I don't really know the tropes. I feel bad admitting it, but like I think is misunderstanding one of them.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah.
So there's misunderstanding. Actually, I've written another romance, and I guess there is that like that, I don't know what it's called when you I guess it's misunderstanding again. It's like a Pride and Prejudice-y kind of like you assume something about somebody. So there's those. And I also kind of like the enemies to lovers thing, but again, I guess that's misunderstanding, right? Like, because that isn't that, you know? So I just basically showed how I don't know romance really well. Sorry.
I mean, the romance trope that I used in mine for my male character is definitely the adorkable trope. In other words, like the geeky guy who ends up being being the romantic interest, because I married a geeky guy, and I can't imagine. Like, I always used to joke with my friends that what I was like, my goal, what I was looking for was a confident nerd, because like that confidence is like, and the competence. I think I definitely have a competence kink in real life. So.
Yeah.
I love competent. That's my book that's out next year. The heroine is a bread baker, and that's one of the things that he loves about it. He's like, I could watch you bake bread all day. He's just amazed that she has the ability to do this thing.
I love that. That's so. I can't wait for your book.
I'm so excited.
Cool. All right. Ryan asks, do you have any? Oh, sorry. Are there? Do you think that there are any significant differences how gender identity and food is written in romance novels compared to other genres that could be instructive for writers outside the romance genre?
In romance, you can eat in bed. I don't know if there's a huge difference in how it's written.
I mean, I think food is intrinsically a really sensual. I mean, the act of eating is a very sensual thing, and it involves smell and taste, and it's like such a full body experience that I think
and I think that in romance, because there is an inherent HEA rule, and that's what we live by.
What's the HEA?
Happily ever after.
Oh,
happily ever after rule. That when you see gender identity in food, you approach it already in an open-minded way. Whereas, like, if you have a super serious lit fic and they're addressing identity, gender, and food, it might not necessarily be in this headed towards love way. Maybe it's just the point of view of, is it positive or not so positive? I'm thinking.
Also, when you're looking at cultural stories like the ones we're telling, food, and I mean, all of that, identity, obviously, but food is such a big part of our identity for a lot of us. When somebody asks me, what's it like growing up Indian? I'm like, well, that means that we eat roti every day. Like that's what it means for a lot of people, is the food is the first thing. So I find that when I'm reading books from other cultures, marginalized cultures, there does tend to be a bit more food in it, because that's a lot of how we identify ourselves when we're not living in a community that we're surrounded by people like us.
So Kat Cho has a question. Do you like slow burn romance or flashy, all-consuming romance better?
I kind of like both.
Slow
burn is hard. Naima Simone writes all-consuming romance. I don't know if you guys have read her. It's like you fall right in and you don't come out until the last page. And that just consumes me. I'm trying to think of a slow burn that really consumed me as well.
I see a lot of
really
slow
bad with
burn
titles.
in fan fiction. Like, I feel like probably because there's so much slash involved, Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no, that's good.
And I wouldn't say I feel like it depends on what genre too. For contemporary, I prefer slow burn just because I feel like it's more realistic. But in epic fantasies or in things like that, I love the all-consuming romance better because it just adds to the stakes and the epicness of the story.
I was like peeking at my. You know how you're peeking at your bookshelves. What is it? Because slow burn doesn't necessarily mean closed door. You know what I mean? It's like there's all-consuming romances that might be closed door. So it's like I always have to think about those descriptors and think about the books that I've read. Like, is it slow burn or is it a closed door romance? You know, so there is a difference in there.
So that's something that I grappled with as well while I was writing Love from A to Z, because it's very slow burn, and I was like, oh no, is this gonna turn people off? But then just the fact that Jane Austen still sells, and she's like that's really slow burn. I was like, okay, I'm gonna hope that there's readers who love that kind of like what it looks like when things are built on slowly. Yeah.
Oh, I just finished a book. I just realized now. So I just finished Christina Lauren's most recent book. I'm looking at my Libby app now, and it's the Honey Don't List, and that's slow burn, and I just tore through it. So anyway, I just want to jump in there because I'm like, I know slow burn. It's just, you read so much and the titles like get mushy in my head.
Ridiculous Blogs asks, do you like love triangles?
That's controversial.
Yeah, not really.
I'm kind of sort of writing one now. It's not really a love triangle, but it's kind of, I think especially in adult romance, love triangles aren't so much a thing. But I'm kind of having to go that route where the character might be attracted to somebody, but she's really attracted to somebody else. And yeah, it's not my favorite, even though I'm writing it.
Yeah,
So,
it's hard to write, I think.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So for my next book that's coming out, it's a love rectangle, and I was just like, I'm going there because sometimes people are like, oh, it's been overdone and stuff, but for all of us writing characters that have not been seen, nothing's overdone for our stories, right? Like we didn't get those kind of stories, so I'm just going there and love rectangle all the way.
I don't like love triangles because someone's always left out. And let's say like you have a perfectly shaped love triangle, and like you're gonna disappoint like half of your readers, right? Because like half of them are gonna be Team Jacob when so I don't know.
Not if you find them other people.
That's the rectangle is actually
Okay,
pretty
all
good.
right, I guess.
Now that I think about it, the one that I'm writing now is actually like a six-sided,
Yeah, exactly.
where you don't know who's going to end up with.
Why don't we just go straight to polyamory, guys? Okay, just go straight to that. So, okay. Oh, I guess we're up for our last question. Oh no. All right, which one are we going to choose? This is a good one.
Oh my gosh.
What are you reading now? And give us a reading recommendation. Oof, that's a hard one. Does it have to be romance?
So I don't know. So I'm reading. Oh my gosh, the J.C. Lee's current book, Last Temptation, The Temptation Wife. I'm so sorry. Did I just butcher that? But I'm reading that and I'm loving it. I just finished Demi Moore's memoir called Inside Out, which was amazing to read because I was in love with Demi Moore back in the 90s. And I just finished Christina Lauren's book, and I'm now reading Lisa Kleypas's Hello Stranger, which is the fourth book in the Ravenel series. And I just love it so much, and it's historical romance.
So,
sorry,
Farah, go ahead.
No, you go first.
Okay. No, so for romance, I just finished reading That Can Be Arranged by Huda Fahmy, which is like a graphic novel-ish kind of book. Yeah. I loved it. It's just so perfectly captured a lot of the things that I went through growing up. So that I just finished. So I'm in an editing phase of a book, so I'm not really reading a lot, but I do want to recommend Black Girl Unlimited, which was something I fell really deeply in love with. It's by Echo Brown, Black Girl Unlimited. It's just wonderful. It just sweeps you away in the whole story.
So I'm also in an editing phase right now, and I'm kind of editing 2 books at once. And so reading is very, very hard. But I had to look up because I forgot the name of the book that I just read, the last one I read, which is The Widow of Rose House. And it was so good. It's kind of like a ghost story. It's historical. There's romance in it. The hero is like a adorable puppy dog. He is so eager to please people, and the heroine is more reserved and prickly because of her past, and she has all these walls she puts up, and his like puppy dog eagerness to be around her is just the cutest thing. And I find that great because it's pretty much it's a Victorian, it's very dark, and there's ghosts, and yet there's this like guy that's just like all sunshine and rainbows everywhere. So I highly recommend that.
Yeah.
What about you, Tiff? I mean, sorry,
So
not Tiff, Eileen.
Yeah.
Can I just mention that
Yeah.
because I don't want to, I messed up the title, JC's title. It's Temporary Wife Temptation. So it's a Harlequin desire. So it's hot, and it's a fake marriage.
Love it. Oh gosh.
Yay! That's it.
Oh my gosh.
It's
It
next
is
on my
a
list.
gorgeous
It's such a
cover.
good cover. It's
And-
like, I don't know if I can get this here, but
Yeah.
two Koreans.
And
on
then
the
they
cover.
just she did a cover reveal a couple of days ago for her next book in the series, and it is equally as gorgeous. So I'm just so like such a cheerleader, like so excited for her.
Oh, so cool. The book I literally just read it earlier today, finished reading earlier today and yesterday, is actually my critique partner's Abigail Hingwen's next novel. So she wrote Love Boat Taipei, which is just a wonderful YA rom-com showing like an incredibly diverse cast of Asian Americans. And her next book is tentatively titled Love Boat Reunion, and it's really, really cool. And it's not, and obviously not its finished date yet, but I can definitely say that you should check it out. And on my TBR list is like that high. But I really am looking forward to reading Felix Ever After by Case and Callender, because they are like the most talented, like multidimensional writer I think I could even think about right now. And I'm really, really I'm 3/4 of the way through Stacey Lee's The Downstairs Girl, which is really historical fiction, but is just fiction for everybody. All right, I think that's it. We should probably wrap it up, but I wanted to encourage everyone to continue with the amazing panels scheduled for the rest of the month in Asian Author Alliance. And remember that all of our books are linked in the video description box, because authors and bookstores and publishers all need support right now if you want to read any of our future books. So please do so. Any other last closing comments by you guys?
Thank you so much, Eileen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Farah and Tiff.
Thank you for having me too.
Thank you.
It was wonderful. It was really fun, and I look forward to someday meeting you guys in real life. But I guess this is a pretty good approximation.
This is fun.